is East Asia Tonight.
Hello and good evening. I'm Shahida Othman. Tonight's top stories from East Asia. Japan's exports fall for second straight month with no U.S. trade deal in sight. Talks on an agreement come down to the wire with Tokyo trying to secure a deal before an August deadline. Taiwan ramps up its security readiness, incorporating an air raid drill into its largest annual military exercise in a nod to President Li's increasingly hardline approach to China. South Korea Supreme Court finalizes the acquittal of Samsung Electronics chairman Lee Jae-yong, confirming the legality of a merger that helped secure his succession at the family-controlled conglomerate. A $47 billion takeover bid for the 7-Eleven convenience store chain collapses. Canada's Couche-Tard withdrawing its offer, accusing the Japanese owner of being uncooperative. Ahead on East Asia Tonight, Taiwan is actively building up its space industry credentials in a crowded field. Does the island have what it needs to take its ambitions forward? And we look at how some Hong Kong residents are taking it upon themselves to innovate and keep the interest going for a folk art known as paper cutting. Japan is under increasing pressure to lock in a favorable tariff deal with the U.S. as the 1st of August negotiation deadline approaches. Tokyo's top trade negotiator, Ryosei Akazawa, and U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick both restated their positions on tariffs in a 45-minute phone call today, but offered no clear signals on the future course of negotiations. Prior to that call, American leader Donald Trump said Japan could soon be subject to a sweeping 25% tariff and that there will unlikely be any policy change. Japan, despite being a key U.S. ally in Asia, has made little progress in persuading the U.S. to lower its tariffs. But Tokyo plans to keep discussions with Washington going. Now, concern over whether a deal can be struck is growing, especially with the latest trade data. Overall outbound shipments in June declined 0.5% on year, with exports to the U.S. down 11.4%, steeper than May's 11.1% decline. Auto exports plunged more than 25%. Now, the auto industry is critical to Japan's economy, with roughly 8% of jobs tied to it. Media reports say U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is set to meet Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba in Tokyo when he travels to the country for the World Expo. Now, for more, we're joined by Vivek Vaidya, partner at Frost & Sullivan. Mr. Vaidya, Japan seems to be caught between a rock and a hard place ahead of the upcoming elections, facing pressure from U.S. tariff threats while also trying to avoid appearing weak or appeasing. So how do you see this playing out politically and economically?
As far as Japan is concerned, their entire economy was structured and built over decades painstakingly on an export base. And that is the entire foundation of the economy. So suddenly when the tariff rules are changing, it is extremely difficult for Japan to adjust to the new reality and make their markets open for any kind of exports, because the entire philosophy on which the economy is built is export orientation. And therefore, it is not absolutely not easy at all for Japan to adjust to this new reality where there would be a fair transfer of goods back and forth. And that definitely is going to be a challenge as far as Japan is concerned.
You know, the U.S. has long criticized the Japanese auto market as being close to American manufacturers. But what's the reality behind this? How much of it is really a market fit issue versus a trade barrier problem?
The market, as far as the products are concerned in both the countries, are structured dramatically differently. If you go to Japan, the cars are much smaller. They are called K cars. There is a significant portion of cars which are less than 1000 cc or 1 liter cars. And as a result, the structure of the entire industry itself is quite dramatically different. Whereas what has happened in the US is the cars are larger, they sell a lot of pickup trucks, and over a period of decades, US market is targeted by Japan, and Japanese automakers have created products, designed and developed products that are suitable for US markets. And because of this, Japan is able to target the US market very easily, whereas vice versa is not really possible. So the structure of the market is dramatically different. So it is not just the trade barrier issue. It is the completely issue of market segmentation and the type of product that is available in the domestic markets in either countries.
So do you think that this nuance is lost in the current high-level US trade negotiations?
Well, a lot of nuances are lost in trade negotiations. I think the trade negotiations are happening with a very extremely cookie-cutter approach, which we have never seen happening before. The trade negotiations, FTA negotiations that we track at Frost & Sullivan are usually where sensitivities of different countries are taken on board. There are some go-no-go areas, and there are some areas where both these countries try to trade with each other. Whereas both countries understand and appreciate that there are some areas where the other country may not be open for any kind of exports or imports, and that is kind of assured by the other country. But in this type of negotiation, we are trying to arrive at a number across all the commodities, which is unprecedented. And it is very hard for us to wrap our heads around how these negotiations are going to benefit either of the countries.
As we saw, Japanese auto exports to the U.S. tumbled more than a quarter in June. With so many jobs in Japan tied to the auto industry, to what extent could the potential U.S. tariffs on Japanese vehicles trigger broader economic or labor unrest? What kind of ripple effects can we expect to see?
So in short term, of course, there will be effects on Japanese manufacturer, but you have to understand that Japan does not export all its products from Japan. They have a very well diversified supply chain where the plants are located not just in Japan, but they are located in US, they are located in Mexico, Canada, Europe, India, Asia Pacific, almost everywhere. And as a result, you can't really think of it as a single dimension problem where tariffs are on Japan and therefore Japan will lose out. No, they would change their production configuration. They will start manufacturing in overseas plants and try to retain their volumes. So yes, there would be some impact on the production that is happening in Japan directly. However, it is unlikely to be the doom and gloom that most of the pundits are predicting.
But do you see any room for compromise or strategic realignment between American and Japanese automakers that could perhaps de-escalate tensions and avoid a tariff standoff between both sides?
I would say that automotive or cars are only one part of the entire negotiation piece. So even if there is a negotiation agreement that is reached between the car makers, the entire problem is still not really addressed, because the entire trade negotiation is not just about automotive or cars. It encompasses everything. So I'm not sure whether any kind of de-escalation in cars will help them to solve the challenge, which is of the entire trade basket.
All right, Mr. Vadia, thank you so much for sharing your perspectives with us. Mr. Vivek Vadia there, partner at Frost & Sullivan. Taiwan is stepping up its civil defense as military tensions with China continue to rise. For the first time, an air raid drill has been built into the island's largest annual military exercise. CNA's Victoria Jen has more.
It's not often you see a Taipei street this quiet in the middle of the day. There's no cars or scooters moving in sight. But that's exactly what happened this afternoon when the city came to a sudden standstill. At 1:30 p.m., air raid sirens rang out, and within minutes, the roads were cleared. It was part of the civil defense drill, the first time Taiwan has included in its annual Hanguang military exercise. For 30 minutes, everyone was told to drop everything that they were doing, get off the road and take shelter. Drivers pulled over, buses let passengers off. People walking outside were guided into nearby buildings. While metro stations didn't shut down, passengers were asked to leave the platforms and follow safety instructions. Officials say that the drill is a response to what they called growing military threats from China. As much as it was about stress testing the system, Thursday's exercise was about drilling the idea of civilian readiness into residents. And it comes as President William Lai takes a much more hardline pro-independence approach towards China. He has called China a foreign hostile force and repeatedly made references in official speeches that imply Taiwan's sovereignty. China claims Taiwan as part of its territory and has said it will never commit to renouncing the use of force over the self-ruled island. Victoria Jen, CNA, Taipei.
Japan has condemned the sentencing of its resident in China, describing it as extremely regrettable. A Chinese court yesterday sentenced an employee of a major Japanese drug maker to 3.5 years in prison on the grounds of what Beijing deems as espionage.
今回の判決を受けて中国側に対し改めて当該法人及び他の拘束されている法人の早期釈放、勾留中の正当な権利の保障及び人道的な取り扱い、また司法プロセスの透明性向上を強く申し入れをいたしました。
The man was a staff at Japanese pharmaceutical company Astellas. He had been detained by Beijing since March 2023 and was formally arrested about a year ago. Local media reports 5 Japanese residents, including the Astellas staff, are currently detained in China. The sentence threatens to further strain already tense bilateral relations. The incident is weighing on Japanese firms in China. Firms share that they find it difficult to operate their businesses without knowing what the illegal acts are. The Japanese embassy in Beijing has been providing safety handbooks to visitors to China and urging them to travel with caution. And South Korea's Supreme Court has upheld the acquittal of Samsung Electronics executive chairman Lee Jae-yong in a controversial merger case dating back to 2015. The latest ruling backs 2 lower court decisions that cleared him of accounting fraud and stock manipulation related to an $8 billion merger in 2015. The charges had been related to the 2 Samsung affiliates, Chell Industries and Samsung C&T, in 2015. Prosecutors allege that the merger was designed to cement Mr. Lee's control of the tech giant at minimal cost. Samsung's lawyers said they were sincerely grateful to the court for its decision, adding that the ruling confirmed that the merger was legal. The merger was seen as crucial to Lee's succession as heir of the family-controlled group after his father, Lee Kun-hee, suffered a heart attack. South Korean President Lee Jae-myung has ordered the setup of a new team to investigate the 2022 Halloween crowd crush that killed more than 150 people. The president's order comes after he met bereaved families of recent disasters. Mr. Lee told families he would consider granting the investigative committee special powers to overcome their limited authority. A spokesperson also said officials will be drawing up a detailed plan. Coming up on East Asia tonight, Taiwanese chip-making giant TSMC turns in a sterling report card for its second quarter results. And later, we dig deeper into what could have gone wrong in Canada's Alimentation Couche-Tard's bid to take over one of Japan's most beloved brands. And it's time now for business news with Roland Lim. Roland, Japanese firms are on a record-breaking M&A spree.
You heard right. Japanese firms defying the gloom the rest of the global M&A market, but not on their home turf. We'll get to that soon. But first, some earnings news. The world's largest contract chip maker, Taiwan's TSMC, reporting another quarter of stellar growth. This on the back of a global AI spending spree as demand for its high-end artificial intelligence chips continue to outstrip production capacity. For the 3 months ended June, TSMC logged $13.5 billion in net profit, and that is more than 60% higher than the same period last year. Revenue for the period also 39% to more than $32 billion on year, both figures beating market expectations. The results comes as NVIDIA announced it will resume sales of its H20 chip to China amid a détente in trade between Washington and Beijing. But last month, TSMC said that U.S. tariffs may have some effect on demand due to higher prices. The Taiwanese currency's rally against the greenback has also tempered its growth in U.S. dollar terms. The chipmaker says that every % increase in the Taiwan dollar reduces its gross margin by 0.4%. TSMC's stock ending the day flat before the results were out, but the Taiwan weighted index was up 0.3%. TSMC's record earnings helped chipmakers in the region pair off steep losses. Advantest in Tokyo down 0.8%, SK Hynix in Seoul slumping nearly 9%. Meantime, though, Samsung Electronics ending the day up by more than 3% after the Supreme Court declared that its executive chairman, Jay Lee, of all fraud and stock manipulation charges, marking a major legal victory for the billionaire. Gains in the heavyweights lifting the benchmark Kospi index, helping it to close a tad in the green after falling by as much as 1% during the session. The Japanese yen is weaker against the greenback by 0.6%, 148.75 to the US dollar. Investors also focus on a potential power shift in the upper house elections this weekend. The Nikkei in Japan closing out the day 0.6% higher as investors assess the country's latest trade data that showed that exports dropping for a second straight month. A Japanese trading company, Mitsubishi, says it'll expand its salmon farming by acquiring additional businesses in Norway and Canada. Now, faced with volatile fossil fuel markets and in search of stable revenue streams, Mitsubishi and its rivals have been diversifying into the food business, where demand is set to grow alongside a rising world population. Now, Mitsubishi acquired 3 companies with holdings in Norway and Canada, which would bring its annual salmon production up to 280,000 tons by fiscal 2027, and that's up from its current 200,000 tons. Mitsubishi first entered the salmon market in 2011 in Chile. Now, salmon is one of the most popular sushi items in Japan, but the country imports the bulk of its supply from countries such as Norway and Chile. The country also plans to raise the share of locally sourced seafood to 94% from the current 54% by 2033. Japanese companies are on a tear with mergers and acquisitions, with deals in the first half of this year already totaling the whole of last year's. That's with corporate governance reforms gathering momentum and putting pressure on boards to make cash work for them. The number of deals total around $140 billion for January to June. They're not just completing those on the home ground, but fishing for such deals abroad, with around half of the transactions involving taking over foreign competitors. Now, one lawyer in the field says there's more appetite for overseas acquisitions, with the shrinking domestic market crimping growth prospects locally, though uncertainty over U.S. tariffs is holding some back. And while Japan carries on a scorching streak of global M&As, it appears not so willing to foreign takeovers. Canadian retailer Alimentation Couche-Tard has officially abandoned its record multi-billion-dollar buyout offer for 7-Eleven parent company 7&I Holdings. Now, this brings an end to its year-long campaign to negotiate terms for a deal, which what could have been the largest foreign takeover of a Japanese company. The Circle K owner, citing a lack of constructive engagement by the Japanese retailer for the move, it added that 7&I had engaged in calculated campaign of obfuscation as well as delays to the great detriment of the company and its stakeholders. Now, Couche-Tard says their commitment to not pursuing a hostile takeover remains. 7&I countered Circle K's accusation, saying it was disappointed by the decision and disagreed with their numerous mischaracterizations. It also pointed at significant changes in the global economy, exchange rates, and financing markets from the time when the proposal was first made, which could have affected the outcome. 7&I stocks closed down 9% in Tokyo. Its shares were up more than 25% since Couche-Tard's interest became public 11 months ago.
And Roland, you've been following the twists and turns of this deal, and this was, supposed to be a blockbuster deal. What went wrong here?
Well, analysts say that Couche-Tard tried the soft approach. It didn't work. Despite offering a massive 47% premium on its valuations and also agreeing to divest its U.S. assets in a public listing in the U.S., well, they never actually got any meaningful track with the 7&I management themselves. Instead, Couche-Tard, as I've said, would say that they were met with obfuscation as well as delays. What really could have sealed the deal would have been, some analysts say, constructive engagement. Because even after they signed the non-disclosure agreement and also raised their offer, they came in with an offer, wasn't enough, they sweetened the offer, but still, 7&I's board was never really on board. So some analysts are saying that Couche-Tard should have gone hostile instead.
So the soft approach backfired. They should have turned hostile instead, as you said. So could Couche-Tard have done anything else that's different to get this deal across the line?
Absolutely. I mean, this would have been a change in mindset. I mean, they needed to go in harder, faster. And the deal really shows that Japan is still very much resistant to any foreign company taking over a Japanese corporate. Remember, the Canadian convenience store owner had sweetened the deal, 47%. They were offering 2,600 yen per share. That's a 47% increase over the unaffected stock value. That would have valued 7&I between $45 to $46 billion. But, if Couche-Tard had taken that hostile bid situation, that means they would have taken their tender offer and presented it to all existing shareholders or rallied support from activist shareholders. This would have put pressure on 7&I's management, but they didn't do that because possibly they were afraid of spooking the local investors as well as the Japanese regulators. They didn't do this, so perhaps that's the reason why the deal failed.
And taking a step back, Roland, what does this episode really tell us about the broader climate for foreign M&As in Japan? Are we looking at a setback here?
Well, it's definitely a reality check. I mean, on the one hand, Couche-Tard did make an impression. I mean, 7&I's management were forced to appoint an outsider CEO. It was also forced to come up with a $13.5 billion share buyback scheme for its shareholders, and on top of which, possibly divesting all its U.S. assets in North America in a public listing. So it did make some impact. But at the end of the day, Japan's corporates are still holding on to the old power structures. What I mean by this is that it relied on a white knight. So it had a counter offer by the founding Ito family, the founder of the 7&I group, as well as teaming up with a trading house, Itochu. They came up with a counter offer in order to keep 7&I in Japanese hands. So that was one. And then the shareholders themselves, Japanese shareholders themselves, have to actually they prioritize legacy and control over shareholder value and market logic. So that didn't make sense to a lot of people. I mean, we're offering you more money. Why aren't you accepting it? And finally, they also didn't accept that poison pill strategy, at which they would have actually sold their shares to existing shareholders at a bigger discount. That would have meant it more expensive for Couche-Tard to have sealed the deal. So all these factors into play means that the moral of the story for foreign companies wanting to come into Japan is that do it hard and fast or don't do it at all.
All right, appreciate that, Roland. Thank you very much for speaking with us. Coming up on East Asia tonight, we're going for a short break now. A private Taiwanese company failed in a recent attempt to send a rocket into outer space. What impact will this setback have on the island's ambitions amid an intensifying global space race? We will be speaking with an expert for more insights. This is East Asia Tonight, and here are the headlines we're following. Japan under increasing pressure to lock in a favorable tariff deal with the U.S. as the 1st of August negotiation deadline approaches. No progress after a 45-minute phone call between top trade negotiators from both sides. Taiwan stepping up its civil defense as military tensions with China continue to rise. For the first time, an air raid drill has been built into the island's largest annual military exercise. And the Supreme Court in South Korea upholds the acquittal of Samsung Electronics chairman Lee Jae-yong, backing earlier decisions that clear him of accounting fraud and stock manipulation in a controversial merger case dating back to 2015. Taiwan's space ambitions suffered a recent setback after a launch by a Taiwanese private rocket firm failed to reach outer space last Saturday. T-Space terminated the flight of one of its rockets shortly after liftoff from Japan's Hokkaido spaceport. The firm was aiming for the inaugural flight of its 12-meter hybrid-fueled rocket, the VP-01, to reach some 100 kilometers above the Earth's surface. But its trajectory turned wobbly soon after takeoff before going into freefall. If it had succeeded, T-Space would have been the first foreign company to perform a launch on Japanese soil. T-Space had tried to launch a rocket in Australia back in 2021, but the attempt was abandoned after 3 failures. Now, Taiwan has been seeking to develop its own space program despite a crowded field that includes China. The island is currently holding its annual Han Kuang military drills, and the threat of a Chinese invasion, analysts say, is also behind Taiwan's race to space. Now, for more insights, we now speak with Dr. Chun-Yi Lee, Director of the Taiwan Studies Program at the University of Nottingham. Dr. Lee, welcome to the program. So, T-Space's second failed launch, this time in Japan, following the setback in Australia. What do you think this failure mean for Taiwan's growing space ambitions?
Well, in fact, that there would be many failures before an actual successful launch. That's all we know. So I don't take this one as a catastrophic failure in its sense, but it is, of course, an unfortunate failed launch of itself. One thing that we would need to just notice that it is a private company to organize this launch. So to what extent that the Taiwanese government actually involved in this scheme, behind the scene, we don't know. But even so, a private company would be able to start to organize and to try to launch the first one in Australia, although didn't actually start it. And this time in Japan, it indeed indicates Taiwan has a great ambitions to join this very crowded space campaign, if you like.
So as you said, T-Space is a key private player in Taiwan's space industry. So how might this affect investor confidence and government support?
I would think that actually after this failed launch, in that sense, the government would probably invest even more or provide even more the human talent and also the capital into this space, or if you like, the satellites designing, because Taiwan knows that it needs a lot capital and human talents for the space program to be actually successful. And one thing I also wanted to address is I don't think really Taiwan wants to compete with any space hegemony power. Taiwan knows the capacity that Taiwan has. So Taiwan may want to achieve a smart space program, which is getting into the niche of the space ecosystem.
Okay, so on that note, if we were to take a look at Taiwan's national space plan, it has big goals, including a plan to launch 6 domestically developed satellites starting in 2026. So what's behind these very specific plans?
I would suggest that it is from the government's intention that wanted to really enter the space. I wouldn't say campaign, but enter the space in a sense of into this global competition, but also knows that Taiwan may not be able to rise up with other already existent powers there. So 6 satellites, it sounds really big ambitions, but actually Taiwan has been working on for this for a long time. So we will see if the ambitions will be fulfilled. But to my knowledge, there's a lot back in the scene that the government and also the academic institution like TAISA has been working really hard to achieve such a goal.
For this specific mission, Dr. Lee, the rocket company used a Japanese launch pad. How does this reflect growing space cooperation between Taiwan and Japan? And what sort of implications will this possibly have on cross-strait relations?
In many ways, Taiwan will have to cooperate with international partners into the space ecosystem. I use this word still. So Japan is the closest alliance that Taiwan would be able to work with, and this is what we have seen. And Taiwan also has the intention to reach out to other international partners, not only Japan. So, of course, you are right that it's really touched the red button of China, because no matter if on Earth or in the space, China is trying to cut every alliance that Taiwan would be able to have. And not to mention in the space, China actually is now the hegemonic power counter the US. So I think that it would create even more tension cross-strait in the space.
What message then do you think this collaboration between Taiwan and Japan is sending to Beijing?
Sending to Beijing that Taiwan has reached out to multilateral international partner, not just in the trade on Earth, but also in the future technology, for instance, in space. So I would say that China or Chinese government now has been aware that, well, no matter how much efforts that they would wanted to cut off Taiwan, but Taiwan still managed to work with other international partners in all kinds of possibility. It might, again, make the Chinese government be more stressful or being more aware of Taiwan's potential international development.
We look at Taiwan's satellite program, Dr. Lee. It's been described as aiming for communications and Earth observation. Could you explain to us what that means in practical terms for Taiwan's national security and also its economy?
In any satellite's design or launch, actually it's a dual usage. So you're very right that Taiwan is focusing on the civil usage of the telecommunication or location, GPS, which is what Taiwan needs. But in a sense that it is also about the national security. And one, again, important point we can't forget is Taiwan is not included in the Starlink's coverage. So what Taiwan can do, or Taiwan would like to try to make an effort to, is to create, or at least to try to align, work together with our other partners to have its own space in the space. In a sense, will be able to not just about the national defense, but also the civil usage of the telecommunication.
All right, Dr. Lee, appreciate your insights. Thank you very much for speaking with us. Dr. Chun-Yi Lee, Director of the Taiwan Studies Program at the University of Nottingham. Chinese-linked hackers are increasingly targeting Taiwan's semiconductor sector, as well as industry analysts in cyber spying programs, according to cybersecurity firm Proofpoint. The firm's researchers say entities that have not previously been targeted are now in the sights of hackers, with unreported hacking campaigns taking place between March and June, carried out by at least 3 separate Chinese-linked groups. Proofpoint did not say whether those attempts were successful. While stealing data through hacking has been a long-running problem, the rise in frequency comes amid export restrictions by the US of high-end computing chips to China. And at a time when the Chinese semiconductor industry seeks to design its own replacements. Experts at Proofpoint said it observed 15 to 20 organizations, ranging from small businesses to large global enterprises facing attacks. But Proofpoint also believes this remains a limited phenomenon. Separately, cybersecurity firm Team T5 noted the Taiwan chip industry saw an increase in emails tied to a few hacking groups and added that such targets have long been an interest when it comes to Chinese-related spying. The Chinese embassy in Washington, responding to a Reuters query, said cyber attacks are a common threat faced by all countries and that Beijing firmly opposes all forms of hacking. Cambodia has arrested more than 1,000 people in cyber scam raid since early this week. It follows a directive issued by Prime Minister Hun Manet to law enforcement and military personnel, warning them to take action against the criminal operations or risk losing their jobs. The Cambodian leader highlighted that the scams are not only threatening security in the region, but globally as well. He says foreign criminal groups are also involved. The suspects, which included more than 200 Vietnamese, were arrested in at least 5 provinces. Another 270 Indonesians were also detained in Poi Phet, a border town notorious for cyber scam and gambling operations. Police seized equipment, including computers and hundreds of mobile devices. Other suspects include nationals from Cambodia, Thailand, Bangladesh, Myanmar, China, and Taiwan. Now, the crackdown is the latest in a series of mass arrests as the government is being criticized for not doing enough to prevent the spread of online scams. Amnesty International released a report last month accusing authorities of deliberately ignoring human rights abuses, including slavery, human trafficking, and child labor. It adds that these were carried out by Chinese criminal gangs in scamming compounds across the country. Phnom Penh has routinely denied such claims. Now, coming up on News Asia tonight, a sticky situation in South Korea. We'll look at what authorities are doing to address an oversupply in rice and why farmers say the solution is not as easy as it sounds. And see how the folk art of paper cutting is reimagined and preserved. At least 3 people are dead and hundreds ordered to evacuate as torrential rain triggered flooding and landslides in central South Korea. And it may not even be over. Authorities warn more extreme weather is forecasted this week. South Korea's weather agency says southwest Chungcheong province saw some of the heaviest hourly downpours, reaching levels typically seen once in a century. More than 400 millimeters of rainfall hit Seosan City, the highest daily record since 1904. Now, the downpours left a trail of destruction in its wake, inundating roads and uprooting trees. Authorities remain on high alert as rescuers continue to search for survivors swept away by the floods. Police earlier reported 1 victim was found dead after being trapped inside a submerged vehicle. South Korea last endured record-breaking rains and flooding in 2022, where 11 people were killed. On East Asia tonight, we've been covering how Japan's been enduring a year-long rice shortage. And South Korea, on the other hand, is facing a problem of having too much rice. It buys huge amounts of rice from its farmers to take excess supply off the market and stabilize prices. The government is encouraging rice farmers to switch to other crops. But farmers say it's not that simple. CNA's Lim Yeon-seok has the story.
From the rice paddies of Haenam in the south, all the way to the northern plains of Choron, South Korea's fertile lands produce an abundance of rice. Choron County in northern Gangwon especially is known for its premium grains, cultivated using clean water and fresh air in a heavily controlled area. These rice fields lie just south of the demilitarized zone separating the 2 Koreas, which are still technically at war. Pang Hyun-ho started helping out at his parents' farm in 1991, when security measures were even stricter. These days, it's not cross-border tensions that worry farmers. It's persistently low rice prices due to oversupply and sluggish demand. A 5-kilogram pack costs about 15,000 won or $11 on average. Farmers here, like Mr. Pang, say the soil conditions make it challenging and expensive to convert the land for other crops.
현무암 토양에 오대라는 잘 매치가 돼서 저희는 쌀을 할 수밖에 없고 논콩을 김제평야나 이런 데 가보니까 많이들 심으셨더라고요. 이게 논 만든 게 또 쉽게 밭이 되질 않아요. 한 3, 4년은 돼야 이게 밭이 되는데
From 2021 to 2024, the government purchased 1.2 million tons of rice in response to unstable prices caused by oversupply. Government-held reserves currently stand at around 850,000 tons, according to official data. Some farmers in Haenam County in South Jeolla Province are starting to plant other crops. Farmer Moon Yok says rice farming earns him about 3,000 won or $2.20 per pyong, which is about 3.3 square meters. Growing chestnut pumpkins can bring in up to 10 times more if conditions are right.
영농의 규모나 방법을 바꾼다는 것은 토질이나 주변의 환경에 의해서 많이 좌우되기 때문에 무조건 이렇게 쌀을 대체할 수 있는 농업으로 바꾼다는 것은 많은 소요, 비용과 어떤 노동력이 필요하기 때문에 그런 것들이 쉽지는 않은 것 같습니다.
Farmer Kim Jun-hyung switched to beans 3 years ago as part of a government program launched in 2018 to tackle the rice surplus. He now sets aside half his farmland for beans and gets subsidies amounting to about $730 a month. But he knows he can't rely on these forever.
자신만의 농민들 각자만의 브랜드를 만든다든지 좀 통합을 해서 젊은 사람이 주축이 돼가지고 좀 그분들의 농사를 가져오면서 제가 대표로 이제 뭐 농산물을 판매한다든지 이렇게 해서 정부의 지원이 조금 없어진다는 걸 대비하는 것도.
South Korea's farmers know they need to expand the market for their rice. Japan's recent import of Korean rice for the first time since 1999 has fueled hopes that more countries might be willing to buy their rice. Lim Yeon-suk, CNA, Haenam County, Jeolla Province, South Korea.
Some young Hong Kong residents are taking it upon themselves to ensure traditional crafts live on beyond the old master artisans. But the young are doing it their way by applying modern touches to elevate traditional craft. Mei Wong speaks to one such artist in this third of a 4-part series on the survival of traditional crafts in Hong Kong.
Sketching a Chinese character and cutting it out with a paper cutter seems like an easy task for 34-year-old Nick Zhao. He's adept at paper cutting because of his professional background.
Paper cutting is a folk art, so it is something that you're supposed to learn at home through your mother, through your grandmother. Unfortunately, they didn't pass down this skill to me. It was something that I learned from my background in architecture. I was building models and I was cutting a lot of paper and card and then building things in 3D and mostly just by hand cutting with a penknife.
It all started with a random idea of wanting more unique Chinese New Year zodiac animal decorations that led Nick down this path of expanding the use of his paper cutting techniques. 4 years ago, he started producing and selling the zodiac paper cutting crafts publicly.
So if you just cut around this edge by following the lines.
Got it. I'll give it a shot. Some may view paper cutting as a very old-fashioned kind of trade. But Nick over here has decided to inject new life into this very old craft. He even quit his corporate job about 1 year ago to pursue this. That's because he truly believes there's a lot more opportunity in this in order to further extend the life of such crafts. Today, he's collaborating with international brands like Dior and apparel retailer Lululemon. and his projects are not limited to staying on paper.
So outside of Chinese New Year, I would collaborate with luxury brands, clothing stores, to help them design workshops. For example, their VIP guests can come and experience, rather than just giving out gifts. I do hope I'm keeping the tradition alive. Even though I'm not traditionally trained through a family lineage, I do think that I try to embody parts of the traditional crafts by bringing it into new media, by adding contemporary philosophies, design concepts into a fading industry.
Making it applicable and relevant in the daily lives are vital to breathe new life into traditional crafts. The younger generation must be able to relate to it, and technology plays a key role.
The society is changing, the community is changing. We still can using the traditional way actually to preserve in cultural heritage, but it's slow. And it's a bit harder to trigger younger generations' interests to get in touch of intangible cultural heritage. So that is why I think digital technology actually will be able to promote, trigger the interest.
Even the Cultural Heritage Centre, whose aim is to preserve the very history and techniques of old Hong Kong handmade crafts, is keeping up with the times and relying on technology as an outreach to the younger crowd.
Craftsmanship is the core. I think technology is a means. We make use of different kinds of means. We can make use of interactive programs, some QR code for audio guides, to deliver the main informations of a particular intangible cultural heritage items to the public. So many young people actually is interested in learning about the intangible cultural heritage.
Technology can coexist with preservation, many say. And the increasing use of digital technology will be inevitable if the art of traditional craft making is to live on. May Wong, CNA, Hong Kong.
And before we go, Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is wrapping up his state visit to China. On the 6th day of his trip, he toured a panda breeding facility in Chengdu. There, he visited Funi, a giant panda that was loaned to Adelaide Zoo in 2009. The panda, along with a potential breeding partner, Wang, were returned to China last year.
Just fabulous experience. I mean, they are absolutely wonderful animals, and of course our Adelaide Zoo pandas are a great sign of friendship between Australia and China.
When asked about how his state visit went, Mr. Albanese said his time in the country had been very positive and warm, and called Funi a great ambassador for China. Is the reunion we didn't know we needed. And that's East Asia Tonight. Don't forget headlines anytime at cne.asia. Plus, we are on Facebook and YouTube.